Hi Spring fans! In today's installment of Spring Tips, we're going to go ahead and take a look at different ways to observe the sort of state of the system. In previous installments, we've looked at, for example, Cloud Foundry, and we looked at how you can get a sort of at-a-glance perspective of the state of the system based on the way the platform sees things. And we looked at Spring Cloud Data Flow, which also gives you a very convenient sort of op-centric perspective on messaging-based microservices. But there are also some nice alternative approaches to visualizing or understanding the sort of layout of your system, the structure of your system. And both of these things that we're going to look at today, Ordina's JWorks microservices dashboard and the Spring Boot admin, both work very well in conjunction with Spring Cloud's Discovery Client abstraction. So any service registry that you use through the through the Discovery Client abstraction will work just fine, and it can be used to discover the relevant nodes in the system. So this makes it a sort of no cost win, right? You can just add a dashboard, one of the two dashboards that we're going to look at today, to get sort of a map or a sort of bird's eye view of the whole system at a glance, which is invaluable when you're trying to build a system that has a lot of nodes, a lot of moving parts. Okay, so we need to set up a few prerequisites here. First, we're gonna set up a Eureka service registry, so we'll build that here, and we'll configure this because we need a service registry. And I mentioned earlier that you can use any service registry that you want, and that's true, of course. But Eureka is very simple to set up. You could also use alternatively HashiCorp Console. You could use Apache Zookeeper. You could use Cloud Foundry itself. I mean, anything that has for which there's a Discovery Client abstraction will work just fine. So let's spin this up. We'll go to our Java class here, and we'll say @enable Eureka server. Okay, and we'll go to application.properties spring.cloud. Sorry, spring.application.name equals Eureka -service, and we'll spin this up and port 8761, and that'll do. That's the registry. Now we need a few clients. We need a few things to visualize. Otherwise, this wouldn't be much of a dashboard if we had nothing to sort of discover and work with. So let's go build our first client. We'll call this one client A, and what we're going to do is we're going to add the web support and actuator. That's important. We need actuator for some of this, right? That gives us some very useful information. So we'll have now the Discovery Client, Eureka Service Registry Discovery Client implementation. We'll add that to the class path. We'll call that Client A, and we'll generate another one called Client B. Very imaginative. And these are just REST APIs. I mean, these are just your average hypothetical microservice APIs, right? So here we go, Client A, Client B, and we have here, we can see in the console that Eureka is trying to register itself with itself. So localhost 8761. Oh, server.port. That's why. It's trying to register itself with itself, and it can't find itself because it's not running on the standard port that it's usually at. Now, of course, that's a property that you could specify to point it to a different instance, or even better, there's a property you could specify to say don't register yourself. But for our purposes, it's fine to just rectify it because I don't want to get too much into the weeds on setting up a Eureka registry. Good. Working. Now we're cooking. And that'll do. That'll be our instance. Now let's go back to client A here, and we need to say that this is called client A. And in our code, we'll just build a very simple endpoint here. Oops, did I type that in twice? Client A, that's fine. Client A application. We're going to activate the service registration and discovery support. So enable discovery client. That's the same annotation regardless of the implementation. And we're going to make this a REST controller, just a simple REST controller. And we're going to call this one name, return A at git mapping. Okay, so now when somebody goes to /, they'll get the name of the service. We could also just go to the info endpoint and configure spring.application.id if we wanted to show up there, but this is fine. Okay, so this is a very simple service. We're just gonna spin it up, right? I'm not here to talk about configuring or writing microservices. We're gonna talk about observing them, monitoring them. So this is our first service here. We're gonna copy that, save ourselves the precious few keystrokes, and then rinse and repeat here with client B. Client B. Client B. Okay. Client B application. And we're done. Okay, there's this. So now we've got client B up and running. We'll rename this to be B, and we'll change this to be on another port, of course. So spring.application.name equals client B, server.port equals 8081, because the other one will have spun up on port 8080 by default. We need to preclude collisions there. And now we have a few things we can do here. We have a few types of dashboards that we can look at, right? So we've got client A, there's that. Client B should be joining us here any second now, I hope. There it is. So there's client B. They're both on, this is on a standard port 8080, so it's fine. This is on port 8081. They're both available. They both have actuators. So if we go to the info endpoint, we go to the metrics endpoint, for example. Let's install my browser plugin here. Extensions, and Json view seems to be constantly disabling itself. Extension contains a serious security vulnerability. I will have to look into that later, but for now, we need this, so here we are. There's our endpoint. There's the endpoint with information, right? And this is the actuator. The actuator just surfaces information about each individual node, things that you can use to observe what's happening, right? This is very much inspired by, for example, what Google does. They have the Google Borg-mon approach, right? The Borg monitoring approach, and the Borg monitoring approach stipulates that every service should articulate its own state. It should be observable. It should provide information that operators and others can use to understand the state of the application. And who better to articulate that state than the service itself? So these are endpoints, well-known endpoints that provide well-known payloads that are germane to the state of this particular service. And this is useful. If you know where to look, you can find this information on every single service. It's not generated by an adjacent process. It's not a Java monitoring agent that sits underneath the process. It's not another process in the same container, in the same node. Instead, it's in the Java code itself, right? And so you can customize this using code, right? You can change and articulate particular information if you want, and the defaults are also very useful. So metrics is one endpoint. Health certainly is another, right? So here's health. There's health, and if I go to 881. I get the same information, right? I get the same kind of perspective. There's, is it endpoints, I think? Endpoints, actuator. There's mappings. We can always use mappings. Mappings tells us what endpoints are available. And I guess this is, I'm looking for the endpoint that tells me what endpoints there are. Autoconfig, health, heap dump, config props, Archaeus, env, resume, methods. Maybe I was just thinking of this. At any rate, this is here. So you can get all sorts of cool information from this endpoint if you want. This information is all in JSON. It's a REST service. There's a way you can get this information via JMX as well, right? So, but the problem is you have to know where to find the service. You have to know where this information is, and then you have to be able to read it and parse it and visualize it and so on, and that gets tedious. So one way to sort of understand this information and kind of aggregate it and make it easier to consume it is to use the Spring Boot admin from from code-centric. So let's take a look at that first. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to start.spring.io and we're going to build a Spring Boot admin instance from a vanilla Spring Boot application. So we'll bring in web support, we'll bring in Eureka service registration discovery support, actuator support, and we're going to hit generate. Now, this will be our instance, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to open this up and tell it to become an admin server, but we need to add the code-centric Spring Boot admin dependencies to make this a admin server. So right now the current incarnation is version 1.4.4, so we'll use that. There's two bits. There's the user interface itself and then the backend API. Naturally, these could be co-located in the same node as we're doing here, or you could separate them. So we have to bring in both. That said, this is a natural thing to extract out into a property, so consider doing that. Okay, replace all in this file. Thank you. Now, there's a few ways for the Spring Boot admin to discover other nodes. As I mentioned, the easiest way for us is just to use the Spring Cloud Discovery Client abstraction. So we say @enable admin server, that's the Spring Boot admin, and then we say @enable discovery client. There is optionally a second alternative, second idea, which is to use the Spring Boot admin client. And I don't know, I think I'd stay away from an extra dependency on the client side. I'd prefer if I could just make this all work, soup to nuts, without having to add any extra dependencies besides service registration and discovery to my services. Now that said, spring.application .name equals Spring Boot admin. We're gonna run this on port 8082, and that should do it. That should be everything we need to run the application. Let's go ahead and spin it up. And this is going to spin up and it'll talk to the other services as they've been registered in the registry. And it'll show us information that it's going to glom by mining the information from the actuator endpoints, right? So here's this. Yes, I would like to allow notifications. There we go. Very cool, huh? So this is, it's showing us the service registry itself. It's showing us client A and B. And we can click on these details, the dropdown first of all, and we can see that these endpoints correspond to the endpoints in the actuator, right? These are the very information, the menu of options that I was trying to find when I was looking in the actuator JSON output is now cleanly and plainly presented to me right here. You can also see that this application has these very handy browser notifications, right? That's a very nice feature. So as things happen, as the heartbeat events get emitted from these different nodes and they come into, they get registered into the registry, we can see that automatically online here in the monitor, in the dashboard. So now we can see that the Spring Boot admin has been registered and it's available. Now, if I click on any one of these, let's say that we click on client B, right? Go to metrics. We can see there's a very convenient little dashboard here with all the sort of metrics that we saw reflected on the / metrics endpoint in the application itself, but they're all visualized, right? So this is very, very useful because we can at a glance kind of understand what these numbers mean, what they should mean, right? We can see the numbers are drawn for us. They're visualized for us. This is not just the metrics, right? The environment itself, the environment endpoint, the env endpoint, shows us an enumeration of the system properties and the environment variables in that local node. We can see all that reflected specifically in the environment, and it's actually separated out by different property sources, it looks like. So here's the system environment versus the Java properties, JVM properties, etc. So all this stuff is all separated out here, and it's easy to read and easy to visualize. And of course, you can see which profiles are active, which is very convenient. So maybe you have certain properties that are available only for a certain profile. Again, all this information you could get by explicitly looking at the endpoint itself, but why, right? It's all readily interrogated and worked with here. The other thing that's really nice is you can change properties for that particular node. Here that's something you can do in the application itself, of course, using the endpoints, the actuator endpoints, using post and so on. But it's nice to be able to do that all visually and interactively from this sort of operator-friendly console. And of course, it's nice to be able to filter down, as I've just done here, the number of possible or applicable properties. So I think that's very convenient. Naturally, we could view the JSON just like we did before, right? So here's the env endpoint. This is what we would have gotten if we had gone to the endpoint ourselves. Oh no, this isn't. This is actually the JSON that the admin has taken from that node, right? So that's very convenient as well. The logging information, this isn't configured. I don't have this configured, but it shows you how to do that. It shows you configure Jolokia, and then how to configure logback if you want to. And then you can actually set and specify and override logging levels, right, from this very convenient dashboard. There's also, if you have Jolokia, you can also access this information from JMX, right? So that would be very convenient. And threads. So if you want to see what's running, which ones are kind of blocked or idle, this is all sort of at a glance understandable and visualizable. You can click on any one of them, and you can see the sort of deep thread dump and so on and so on. And we have trace. Now trace is trace is actually just the request log, right? Trace is not distributed tracing; it's a request log, and it shows you which requests have been made, what endpoints, the responses, and the headers, and all that stuff. So this is actually a very, very convenient visualization. It shows you when, chronologically, it shows you this very convenient visualization of when requests happened. This corresponds, of course, to the trace endpoint itself, and the trace endpoint itself by default keeps the last 100 requests in memory, so you can customize all that if you like. And of course there's heap dump, which will download the same thing that we downloaded earlier. So we have all this very, very cool information all at a glance, right? We also have the sort of general view, shows you the health, right? You're going to care about that. If any of these are red, you've got a problem, right? Everything seems to be happy now. It'll show you the memory, it'll show you the JVM, it'll show you garbage collection. I mean, just a sort of at a glance, really important stuff that you're going to care about, right? So I like the Spring Boot admin. I think it's very, very convenient for sort of easily working with and navigating through all your different applications. But it doesn't really give us a map, does it? It makes it easy to at a glance, interrogate or understand what the services are doing, but it doesn't show you how they relate to each other. So for that, we're going to look at the Ordina JWorks microservices dashboard. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build a microservices dashboard, in the very same way as we did the Spring Boot admin. We're just going to go ahead and build one from a vanilla Spring Boot application. So I'm going to call this the microservices dashboard. We'll use web support, Eureka discovery support, actuator support, and we'll hit generate. Open this up and do a lot of the same sort of stuff as we did before, right? So we'll say application.properties, spring.application.name equals microservices dashboard, server.port equals 8083, and we'll register with Eureka as we have everything else. We'll then need to activate the Ordina JWorks microservices dashboard dependencies. So let's go ahead and add that to our build. We'll go to pom.xml and add this here, and I think the latest version is 1.01, so 1.01. Wait for that. And we say @enable microservices dashboard server. And that, I think, should do it. So let's spin this up as well. Okay, localhost 8083. There's our dashboard. And there we go. We can see now that it has discovered the nodes via the registry, and it has columned, sort of sorted them and put them into buckets. Back-end components, these are components that are middleware, if you will. They talk to other services. So if you had Redis, for example, if you had a message or MySQL driver or something like this, those kinds of beans would automatically be reflected here in the back end. We'd see the microservices themselves. These are the Spring Boot applications that have been registered in the registry. And we have UI components and resources, which are APIs, all reflected here. And we can also see how they relate to each other. So if I click on, for example, the Eureka registry, I can see that it uses those two different bits of middleware. The the / API, which is exposed in our client B and also in our client A, is in turn going to talk to something in the back end here, right? I mean, in theory. So we can see the relationships. That's very, very convenient. It shows us the distinct endpoints, which services have them if they are shared, that you can see that at a glance. It shows you the states, whether they're up or down or whatever, right? So these are actuator endpoints as well. This is from the health endpoint. And of course you can manually add these things as well, but for our purposes it is very nice to just have them all sort of automatically reflected, right? So we have looked at two different ways to visualize your system, and these are not the only ways to do this, of course, but there's a lot of really nice opportunities here. I would love to see the microservices dashboard work sort of merged with the Spring Boot admin. I'd love to have this visualization, but have the same at-a-glance visualization of the actuator endpoints and so on as the Spring Boot admin now. That said, you do get some of that here. If I click on this, I can see, for example, the status. I can see basic information here, right? I think that's convenient, but it would be nice to have a little bit more, right? All right, so that was a quick look at some of the dashboards that can help us get a better understanding of our system through the Spring Cloud Discovery Client abstraction and healthy living. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you around.